Make or break moment. At its heart, the recall campaign is about the struggle between labor and management.
After all, the whole thing started when Governor Walker introduced his budget repair bill, stripping collective bargaining powers away from public employees.
The election is viewed as a decisive battle for the labor movement. Fox 6's Mike Lowe joins us with a closer look in tonight's political lowdown.
Good evening, Ted. The recent release of a clip from a documentary film put the spotlight on Governor Walker's motivations for cutting collective bargaining. When asked by a billionaire donor to his campaign if he could make Wisconsin a right-to-work state, he said he would start with public unions, then use a divide-and-conquer strategy. The labor movement sees that statement as proof that Walker wants to bust unions. Walker says he has no intention of making Wisconsin a right-to-work state, but either way, the recall election is viewed as the decisive battle in this struggle. Will it be labor's last stand?
You have done a service to the labor movement and a service to the country.
We're in very interesting times in the state of Wisconsin.
From the protesters to Prosser and Kloppenberg, and from the Occupy movement to the Tea Party movement, from recounts to recalls.
Good luck.
The last year has been a series of smaller skirmishes in a building political war. A war that will reach its endpoint on Election Day.
What we have in Wisconsin is this very decisive battle.
The labor movement is staking all of its political clout on the recall of Governor Scott Walker.
I think this is labor's last stand.
If Walker wins, the labor movement will be mortally wounded, having spent millions, money and manpower, effort and energy, all for nothing.
If the recall is unsuccessful and Governor Walker retains his seat, then it will be a crushing blow to the labor movement.
But if the unions win, it could essentially stop similar anti-union legislation in its tracks.
It sends a clear message to the right-wing groups that are fronting this assault that workers aren't just going to stand by and watch their rights be stripped away.
Richard Abelson is the executive director of AFSCME District Council 48, which represents all Milwaukee County and City of Milwaukee employees. He says the labor movement knows the recall is important, but he says it's not all important.
Walker took his best shot at us and we're still standing. So this is not a make or break moment for the labor movement. The fact of the matter is that the recall is far broader than just the governor's recall. It's about the process of taking back our state.
Various unions worked together with the Democratic Party driving the recall petition process, collecting nearly 1 million signatures to force the recall election, in the process breathing new life into a waning movement.
You tell me, is this movement dying or is it growing?
Phil Neuenfeld is the president of the Wisconsin AFL-CIO, which represents 250,000 workers in Wisconsin.
What's interesting about Wisconsin is I think this is a classic confrontation of wealth versus people power. This movement will grow and it'll continue to grow. Whether we defeat Scott Walker or not, we have an agenda.
It was a broad-based national assault. It took place in Ohio, it took place in Indiana, it took place in Iowa, it took place in Michigan, it took place in Minnesota. Obviously, Wisconsin was the focal point of much of that.
There are unique circumstances, though, that made Wisconsin ground zero in the labor war. First, a 50-50 electorate.
The power is so evenly divided that each side thinks that they can win this battle.
Second, Wisconsin is the birthplace of AFSCME and has a rich history of labor peace.
The dynamics are different, the union density is different.
Third, in 2010, there was a wave election, which brought a bold and brash young governor who wouldn't back down. Add to that the spectacle of a capital city that revels in protest politics, and it was a perfect storm.
Governor Dreyfus once said Madison was, about 30 square miles surrounded by reality. I think it's an overwhelmingly liberal base. It's kind of completely different politically than other parts of the state, even different than Milwaukee. You have the University of Wisconsin just a few blocks down the way. You have a lot of public employees at the state level there. And you have a lot of people who a generation or two ago were big on the protest and other issues in Madison. So all those things kind of converged at the same time. And then you had 14 state senators that took off and left for about a month.
Do you believe that this is, as some have said, Labor's last stand?
I don't know if it's the end or not, but I think that's what threatens them. They're fearful, particularly in Washington, because most of their money comes by forcing it at the local level. They're fearful that if public workers are given the choice, most of them are going to choose to keep their own money, and I don't blame them.
Governor Scott Walker says his move was actually about protecting workers by preventing unions from taking mandatory money out of their paychecks. He also argues that it protected taxpayers by giving the government the ability to get competitive bids on things like health insurance and school boards' flexibility on hiring and firing decisions. But unions and Democrats see something much more sinister.
It's simply about just trying to seize political power.
What they see is an effort to bust the unions.
It's about smashing dissent.
And because unions are by far the largest donors to the Democratic Party, the move would also cripple the Democrats.
Governors come and go, the institution stays. This isn't Labor's last stand by any stretch of the imagination.
But the results of the recall are sure to ripple across the country. So far this year, Labor has had mixed results. Democrats lost their bid to take control of the Wisconsin Senate in a round of recalls last summer. But union power roared back in Ohio, where a statewide referendum repealed a law limiting collective bargaining rights. But unions suffered a violent body blow when Indiana became the first state in more than a decade to pass right-to-work legislation. Democratic candidate Tom Barrett says that's Walker's ultimate goal.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that what Governor Walker did, when again using his words, not mine, dropped the bomb, that was the beginning of a divide and conquer strategy that was intended to make Wisconsin a right-to-work state.
Is this the first step in making Wisconsin a right-to-work state?
No, for us, I mean, this is 100% about balancing the budget. If it was about that point, we would have eliminated everything. But we maintained collective bargaining, we tied it in.
But Barrett says that denial and $1.50 will get you bus fare.
His playbook is very similar to the playbook that has occurred in Indiana, where one of his mentors, Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, when he first came into office in Indiana, eliminated the collective bargaining rights for public employees. And for years, he denied that he was in favor of making Indiana a right-to-work state.
So Labor is loaded for bear, even if it's not ready to label the recall as a last stand.
Obviously, it's very important strategically to regain the governor's mansion. However, it is not a make or break moment.
I think there's been a line drawn in the sand that at this point, if the unions can't be victorious, the way the unions were victorious in Ohio through their referendum and knocking down their anti-collective bargaining bill, then there's going to be some real issues as far as the future of unionism in this country.
And not even union foes are suggesting that if Walker wins the recall election, it will somehow immediately eliminate unions. There will still be unions. The question is, what will they look like? A victory would give the labor movement new strength, and particularly in Wisconsin, could serve as momentum going into the presidential election, Ted.
So what were we talking about would be a clear victory? Would it be a couple of recalls? Would it be the governor's election for the unions I'm talking here? Or if it's a clean sweep by the Republicans, that's obviously a clear and crushing defeat.
Oh, absolutely. If they don't win anything, meaning the Democrats, then that'll clearly be a crushing blow for the labor movement. However, the eyes are all on the Walker race, and that's what they've targeted. That's the $100 prize, if you will. That's what they're going for, is the governor's mansion. And if they get that, that'll be viewed as a victory for labor.
Mike Lowe, thanks very much with the Lowdown tonight. Mary?
Bizarre new twist for a former Oneida County medical examiner.